Subscribe to Dr. Nightmare Channel now.
Story 1. The House That Watches Back. I was 17 when I started babysitting for the Mallory family. They had just moved into a huge old Victorian home on the edge of town. You know the type. Too many rooms, creaky floors, and a draft that always seemed to follow you like a shadow. They had one child, Emily. She was 6, quiet, and never said much. Her parents were polite but distant, the kind of people who smiled without showing teeth. From the very beginning, something felt wrong. The first night I babysat, they gave me a list of strict rules. Rule 1, never go into the basement. Rule 2, keep Emily in her room after 8 p.m. Rule 3, if you hear noises upstairs, ignore them. It's just the house settling, they said. Right. They left around 6:30 p.m. I made Emily dinner, played a few games with her, then tucked her into bed by 8 like they instructed. That's when it started. I was sitting in the living room, reading a book, when I heard footsteps, slow, deliberate, creaking above me. Emily's room was directly above the living room, but these footsteps weren't coming from her room. They were heavier, adult footsteps, pacing back and forth. I stood up, heart thudding in my chest, and listened. The steps stopped. I tried to brush it off. Maybe it was just my imagination. But then something fell. A loud thud, like a piece of furniture had been knocked over. I shot to my feet and ran upstairs, bursting into Emily's room. She was curled up in bed, wide awake, staring at the ceiling. "Did you hear that?" I asked. She nodded slowly, eyes wide. "They're awake." "Who?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "The ones who live in the walls," she whispered. My blood ran cold. I checked the entire upstairs, every room. Nothing. No one. Nothing had fallen. Nothing had moved. Still, the air felt different. Charged, like static before a lightning strike. When I returned to Emily's room, she was asleep. Or at least, pretending to be. I stayed in the hallway that night, just outside her door, too afraid to go back downstairs. Around midnight, I heard the doorknob jiggle. Not Emily's, the one at the end of the hall. That door had been locked earlier when I checked it. A storage room, the mom said, and not to worry about it. But it was turning, clicking, softly, rhythmically, like someone was testing it. I didn't move. I couldn't. My legs were frozen. I just stared at that doorknob until it stopped moving. Then came the whispering. Faint, like wind through dead leaves. I couldn't understand the words, but it was close, right behind the door. I didn't sleep at all that night. The next morning, when the Mallorys returned, I tried to explain what happened. They didn't seem surprised. Mr. Mallory said, "Sometimes the house creaks." Mrs. Mallory added, "Old homes have quirks." Quirks! I wanted to scream. But I needed the money, so I agreed to come back. Second night, things got worse. Emily was drawing when I arrived. I asked her what it was. She showed me a picture of the house. Windows were drawn with little stick people inside them, but one window, upstairs above the hallway, had black scribbles over it. Thick, angry marks. "That's their window," she said. "Who?" She didn't answer. That night, I heard it again. Footsteps, dragging sounds, whispering. But this time, something was visible. I was passing the hallway mirror when I saw it. A figure, tall, pale, gaunt, standing behind me. I spun around. Nothing there. But in the mirror, it still stood, watching me. Its head tilted slowly. Then its hand lifted and it pointed toward the basement door. I ran. I grabbed Emily, locked her door, and stayed in there with her all night. Around 3 a.m., the door started shaking violently. Someone or something was pounding on it. I whispered for Emily not to move. She just looked at me and said, "They're not angry at you. They're angry at me." "What did you do?" I asked, terrified. "I let them out once. I was sleepwalking. That's what Mommy said." Jesus. The next morning, I confronted the Mallorys. They didn't deny anything. Mrs. Mallory looked at me, her face pale, and said, "We've tried to leave. The house doesn't let us." I asked them why they moved in. Mr. Mallory's voice cracked. "We didn't. We inherited it from a sister I never knew I had. She died here." I never went back after that night. But sometimes I still dream about that hallway, that door at the end, the whispers. And in the dreams, I hear Emily's voice. They watch from the walls, and they never sleep.
Story 2. What They Buried Beneath the Nursery. When I first met the Devereaux family, they seemed perfect. Wealthy, polite, well-dressed. Their home looked like something out of a magazine. White walls, pale hardwood floors, and expensive furniture that no child had any business being near. I hired them to babysit their 1-year-old son, Aiden. He was quiet, unusually so for a toddler. He barely cried, barely made a sound at all. "We like to keep things peaceful," Mrs. Devereaux said with a smile. "There's nothing worse than a noisy house." Her voice was warm, but her eyes didn't match. The first time I babysat, everything was strictly scheduled. Feedings at precise times, a monitor in every room. And most of all, "Do not let Aiden into the nursery," Mr. Devereaux warned me. "I don't care what he wants, or if he cries. He's not allowed in there, ever." I blinked. "You mean his room?" "No," he said firmly. "He sleeps with us now. The nursery is closed." I nodded, tried not to show my confusion. And that was the start of the strangest job I've ever taken. The Devereaux house was silent at night. No humming fridges, no creaking floors, just a strange, unnatural stillness that made your ears ring. I put Aiden down in the guest room crib around 8 p.m., and everything seemed normal. Until I passed the nursery door. It was at the end of the hallway, locked with a heavy bolt on the outside. A small, dusty plaque was nailed above it. It read, Estelle. Aiden's name wasn't Estelle. That night, while watching the baby monitor, I heard something strange. Not crying, not footsteps. A lullaby. Soft, sweet, and old. A child's voice humming from the hallway. I muted the monitor. The sound was still there. I stepped out, heart racing, and followed it. The melody was coming from the nursery door, faint but unmistakable. Then, as I got closer, the humming stopped and something knocked from the inside. 3 slow knocks. I backed away and nearly tripped over myself. But when I looked back, the bolt was undone. I swear to God I hadn't touched it. I called the Devereaux. No answer. When I turned around, the bolt was back in place, firm, secure, like it had never moved at all. I told myself it was my imagination. Maybe the monitor picked up interference. Maybe the house had weird acoustics. But the next night, it got worse. Same routine, same silence. Around midnight, I woke up on the couch to the baby monitor blinking. No sound, no motion, just static, and then a whisper. One word, over and over. Estelle, Estelle, Estelle. I shot upright and sprinted to the guest room crib. Aiden was gone. I tore through the hallway calling his name. That's when I saw the nursery door wide open. Inside, the room was dusty, cobwebbed, toys scattered like they hadn't been touched in years. And in the middle of the floor, Aiden stood, swaying gently, humming that same lullaby. He turned and looked at me. His eyes weren't right. They were glassy, fixed. And behind him, sitting in the rocking chair, was a girl. Maybe 7 or 8, pale as wax, with long dark hair covering her face. She raised her hand slowly and pointed at me. I grabbed Aiden and ran. I didn't stop running until I got to the front door, clutching him in my arms and panting like I'd just escaped a nightmare. The Devereaux arrived minutes later. They weren't surprised. They didn't ask why the door was open. They didn't ask why I was crying. Mrs. Devereaux just took Aiden from me and whispered, "She's always been jealous of him. We shouldn't have buried her under the nursery." My legs gave out. "Buried?" I stammered. "What are you talking about?" Mr. Devereaux spoke softly. "Our first child, Estelle. She died here. An accident. We didn't want to ruin the home's reputation, so we handled it ourselves." He gestured toward the nursery. "But the spirit lingered. She gets lonely. She wants her brother with her. That's why we asked you to keep him away from the room." I couldn't speak. I left the house in silence. Never returned, never looked back. But some nights, I still hear that lullaby. Even now, years later, sometimes I'll wake up to the sound of humming just outside my door. And I swear I can hear a child's voice whispering from the hallway. "Estelle."
Story 3. The Nightshift Code. I had just turned 18 when I got the job at Fairview Towers. It wasn't a normal babysitting gig. It was an overnight job watching a 9-year-old boy named Mason while his mother worked the graveyard shift at the hospital. The apartment was in a high-rise complex on the edge of the city. A tall, ugly building built in the 70s that always smelled faintly of mildew and burnt toast. But the pay was good, and I needed the money. The mother, Dr. Langley, was polite but intense, always rushed, always tired. She gave me 3 very clear instructions before she left that first night. 1. Mason is not allowed to use the balcony, ever. 2. If Mason starts talking about the man in the vents, ignore him. 3. Do not answer the intercom after midnight, no matter what you hear.
I laughed nervously. Okay, but is that a joke? She didn't laugh back. No, not a joke. Then she left. And just like that, I was alone with a quiet little boy in a dim apartment with flickering lights and yellowed wallpaper peeling off the corners. The first few hours were easy. Mason was calm, a little too calm for a 9-year-old. He didn't talk much, just watched cartoons in a daze, like he was always half listening to something else. At around 9:30, I offered him a snack. He shook his head and said softly, "If you eat after 10, he smells it." "Who does?" He looked up. His eyes were completely blank. "The man who lives in the vents." I paused. "You mean like rats?" He shook his head. "He has eyes like spoons and a neck that bends." I laughed, trying to hide the chill crawling up my spine. "You have a big imagination, huh?" Mason didn't answer, just turned back to the screen. At 10 p.m., I put him to bed. I left the hallway light on, just in case, and I sat in the living room scrolling my phone, trying not to let the weirdness get to me. That's when I heard it. A soft click from the wall. Then a whisper. Garbled, too faint to understand, but it was definitely coming from the air vent. I stood and leaned in. It was rhythmic, a scraping sound, metal on metal, and then something that almost sounded like breathing. I backed away quickly and turned up the volume on the TV. Whatever, old buildings make noises. At 11:57 p.m., the intercom buzzed. Just a quick buzz, like someone had leaned on the front door button. I froze. The clock glowed red. 3 minutes to midnight. I stood up and walked to the intercom panel by the door. Buzz. Buzz. Then silence. I looked through the peephole. The hallway was empty. The panel buzzed again, and this time a voice crackled through. Low. Raspy. Familiar. "Hey, it's Dr. Langley. I forgot my key. Let me in." But something was wrong. The voice sounded off, slowed down, like a recording played at the wrong speed. I didn't press the button. My phone buzzed. A message from Dr. Langley. "All good? Just started my shift." She wasn't at the door. I didn't sleep at all that night. At around 2 a.m., I walked past Mason's room and saw his door wide open. He was sitting up in bed, staring at the air vent above him. "Mason?" I whispered. He turned to me slowly, his face pale, blank. "He wants to know your name." I stared at him. "What?" He pointed to the vent. "He said he likes you, that you smell like summer. He only comes for the ones who smell like that." I closed the door, hard. I sat on the couch until sunrise, jumpy at every creak and whisper in the walls. When Dr. Langley came home, I told her everything. She just sighed and said, "He doesn't like change. He gets curious when someone new comes around." I blinked. "Who's he, exactly?" She avoided my eyes. "There's a reason the rent is so cheap in this building." She never explained further. Against my better judgment, I kept the job. Night after night, I noticed more. The vents weren't normal. They were bigger than they needed to be. Deep, almost like tunnels. And sometimes, when I passed Mason's door, I could hear tapping, like fingers on sheet metal. One night, the power went out. Total blackout. Dead silence. And in that silence, I heard footsteps from inside the walls. Not rats, Not wind. Footsteps. Heavy. Dragging, like something pulling itself slowly through the ventilation system. I didn't move. I couldn't. I just sat in the dark, clutching my phone like it could protect me. Then came the scratching. Inside the vent above the couch, right where I was sitting, followed by a low, wheezing voice. "Open up." My throat got dry. The whisper came again. "I want to see your face." I bolted, ran to Mason's room, and locked the door behind me. He was sitting up, calm as ever. He likes to look at people. That's all. Just don't show him your teeth. I curled into a ball on the floor. Sometime around 5 a.m., the lights came back on. The noises stopped, and I cried. I told Dr. Langley I was quitting. She nodded. She didn't beg me to stay. She just said, "You lasted longer than most. You kept Mason safe. That's what matters." As I left the building for the last time, I looked back. In the top floor vent, just for a split second, I saw a face. Thin, gray, with wide spoon-like eyes. It blinked once and disappeared. To this day, I don't know what lives inside Fairview Towers. Maybe it was never meant to be human. But sometimes, in my apartment, hundreds of miles away, the vents creak at night, and I swear I can smell metal and mildew and hear a voice whispering, "You smell like summer."
Story 4. She said the kids were imaginary. The ad was simple. Live-in nanny needed, quiet house, 2 children, must be comfortable with rural isolation. It sounded perfect. I had just finished college, needed to get away, and the thought of being paid to live in peace was too good to pass up. The house was about an hour from town, isolated, old, hidden behind a wall of trees that blocked out most of the sky. There was no cell service past the mailbox. Miss Willoughby, the woman who hired me, was in her early 50s, sharp features, dark eyes, and a voice that never rose above a whisper. "I don't tolerate lies," she said during our first meeting, "and the children don't tolerate being ignored." I assumed she was joking. I was wrong. The children, Felix and Maisie, were said to be 6 and 8, but I never saw them. Not that first night, not the next morning, not even after meals when I'd place food at the table for 4 and only ever eat alone. "I thought you had kids," I asked on the second day. Miss Willoughby simply smiled. "They're very shy." Then she walked away, slowly, her shoes tapping against the hardwood like clock hands ticking down. I should have left, but the pay was good, and the silence, at first, was calming. Until it wasn't. On the third night, I heard whispering, high-pitched, childlike voices echoing from behind the upstairs door I wasn't allowed to open. They spoke in rhythm, like a game. "One for you, one for me. One for bones, one for teeth." I pressed my ear against the door. Silence. Then knock, knock, knock. Right on the other side. I jumped back, heart pounding. When I asked Miss Willoughby the next morning, she didn't blink. She said, "You must have imagined it." "I heard voices." She looked at me over her tea, smile unchanged. "There are no children in this house." I blinked. "You said—" She interrupted softly. "I said I had children, and they do not tolerate being ignored." I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat in the hallway watching the closed door at the end, waiting, listening. At exactly 2:17 a.m., the doorknob turned. It didn't open. It just turned slowly, then stopped. Then, something scratched from the inside, long, dragging claws against wood, and the whispering returned. "She can't see us, but we see her. She doesn't bleed yet, but she will." I ran to my room and locked the door. I told myself I was imagining it, that I was sleep deprived, that Miss Willoughby had children with developmental issues and didn't want to explain. But that theory shattered the next day. When I went to do laundry, I opened the washer and screamed. Inside were clothes, small, tattered, burned. The fabric was melted in spots, and stuck to it were black, shriveled strands of hair. Children's clothes. I backed away, tripping over the laundry basket. Behind me, I heard a giggle. High, short, right in my ear. I turned around, no one there. I tried to leave. I packed a bag and marched to the front door, but it wouldn't open. The knob wouldn't even turn. The windows, nailed shut. My phone, no signal, not even emergency calls. I was trapped. That night, I didn't go upstairs. I stayed in the living room, clutching a fire poker like it was a sword. Around midnight, I heard tiny footsteps on the stairs. Then giggling. Then the voices, right outside the door. Come out, wherever you bleed. I screamed, backed into the corner, and didn't move for hours. The sun rose. Miss Willoughby found me shaking in the living room. You're pale, she said. They don't like that. They like color in their cheeks. I'm leaving, I told her. I don't care how. Her smile faded for the first time. You agreed to care for them, she said. You agreed to stay. I didn't agree to this. There are things in this house. They're my children, she said flatly, and they're hungry. I locked myself in my room for the rest of the day. When night fell, the whispers returned. This time from inside the walls. We used to be real. We used to be warm. She said she'd keep us. She said we'd never rot. I felt the floorboards shift beneath my feet, like something was crawling underneath. I shoved my dresser in front of the door and curled into a ball. But then I heard the singing, a lullaby, off-key, broken like a record warped from heat. Sleep, little bones, under the floor, sleep in the dark, forevermore. Then came the banging from inside the closet, slow, rhythmic, each hit accompanied by a whisper. She lied, she lied, she lied. When I opened it, I found a hatch, hidden under a carpeted board. The smell that came out of it was unbearable. I lowered my phone light down the hole, and what I saw? Small bones, dozens of them, arranged like a bed, like someone had tucked them in. Little toys, charred dolls, melted plastic, teeth. A child's jawbone sat on a pillow made from ashes, and carved into the wood of the hatch were the words, "She said we were imaginary." I vomited, ran back upstairs, and slammed the hatch shut. I confronted Miss Willoughby the next morning. You killed them? I hissed. She didn't deny it. She said they got sick, fever, then fire. Her eyes were hollow. I told the police they never existed. There were no records, no birth certificates, no doctor visits. They believed me. And now, she whispered, they never left. They still need a mother. That was my cue to run. I don't remember how I escaped. I think I broke a window. I remember blood, screaming, and the sound of footsteps chasing me through the woods. I never went back. That house was burned down 2 months later. Arson, they said. No suspects. No bodies were found. No records of children. Nothing. But I know what I saw. I know what I heard. And sometimes, late at night, I still hear that song. Sleep, little bones. Under the floor, sleep in the dark, forevermore.
Story 5. We don't speak of the third child. I started babysitting for the Ellisons in late October. They lived in an old farmhouse about 20 minutes outside town. Long gravel driveway, sagging porch, wind chimes that never stopped even when the air was still. The parents were kind but formal, the sort of people who smiled without showing teeth. They had 2 children, Anna, age 6, and Caleb, age 9. They were quiet, well-behaved, and eerily polite. But what I remember most was the family photo above the fireplace. There were 3 children in it, 2 boys, 1 girl. But I was only ever told about Anna and Caleb. I pointed to the photo and asked, "Who's that?" The parents went still. Mr. Ellison cleared his throat. "That's an old picture," he said. Mrs. Ellison's voice was softer. "We don't speak of the third child." Then she changed the subject. I should have pressed, but I didn't. I told myself it wasn't my business. That night, after the kids went to bed, I passed the photo again. And I swear, the third child had moved. In the photo, he was originally standing slightly behind the others, but now he was at the edge of the frame, closer to the foreground, his face a little clearer, his eyes staring directly at me. I blamed it on stress. Maybe it was a trick of the light. Until I checked the photo again the next night, and he was even closer, his face sharper, his eyes darker, his smile unnatural. I told myself I was going crazy, but then Anna said something that made my blood run cold. We were coloring at the kitchen table when she looked up and asked, "Do you hear him walking at night too?" I paused. "Who?" She whispered, "Elliot. He used to be my brother." The crayon snapped in her hand. "Used to be?" She nodded. "He got sick and then angry. Now he lives in the attic, but only when you don't look." I stared at her. "Your parents said..." "They don't talk about him. It makes him louder." She looked up toward the ceiling. "He's already mad you saw the photo." That night, I couldn't sleep. I stayed in the guest room. Every creak and sigh of the house made my skin crawl. At 2:11 a.m., I heard footsteps in the hallway. Slow, uneven, not like a child walking, more like something dragging a foot behind it. I crept to the door and peeked through the crack. There was no one there, but the air was colder, and the hallway felt wrong, like the angles were just slightly off. I turned back and nearly screamed. On the mirror beside my bed was a word written in condensation. "Look." I grabbed my bag and texted Mrs. Ellison. She replied a few minutes later, "You're fine. Sometimes the house settles. Get some rest." But I knew what I saw. The next day, Caleb refused to come out of his room. When I finally coaxed him out, he clutched my arm and whispered, "Don't go into the attic." "Why would I?" He looked around, wide-eyed, as if the walls were listening. "Because that's where Elliot waits, and he's always listening." That afternoon, I decided to test it. When the kids were napping, I tiptoed to the attic door. It was nailed shut with thick, rusted boards. But one of the nails had already been pulled loose, and something was scratched into the wood in jagged, uneven letters. "Let me be real again." I stepped back, heart pounding, and nearly tripped over Anna, standing silently behind me. Her eyes were wide. "You're going to make him think you want him," she whispered. That night, everything fell apart. It started with Caleb screaming. When I burst into his room, he was curled into the corner, pointing toward the closet. "He's in there," he sobbed. "He crawled out of the attic." I opened the closet. Nothing. Just clothes and a few toys. But on the inside of the closet door, scratched deep into the wood, was a message. "You saw me." I kept the kids in the same room with me the rest of the night, but even with both of them asleep beside me, I felt watched. And then I heard it from the attic above us. Crawling, not walking, crawling, long limbs scraping across beams, heavy breathing. And then the voice, thin, desperate, broken. "Let me back in the picture." My heart stopped. The lights flickered, and when they came back on, the family photo above the fireplace had changed again. Now, Elliot was standing directly in the center, his face fully visible, and he was smiling, grinning, with eyes that looked nothing like a child's. That was the last night I stayed in that house. I didn't give notice. I didn't ask for my pay. I packed my bag and walked through the dark gravel road until I found signal. I reported everything I could, the attic, the photo, the kids' strange comments. But there was no proof, no records of a third child, no death certificates, no school files. Elliot never existed. At least, that's what the world says. But sometimes, in antique shops or old bookstores, I see him. In pictures I've never taken, photos of strangers where there's always one child standing a little too far in the back, head tilted, eyes empty, waiting for someone else to see him. And when they do, he smiles, because Elliot doesn't want to be forgotten. He wants to be real again.